And welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. On today's episode, I just want to talk about, the fascinating we saw happen with like the Magic the Gathering 30th anniversary set. And why do I say it was like something special, something pretty magical was it really made a good, what's a good way to explain it? It made a good case study for all of us to just sit back and watch and see how it played out. Now, I had made a video about Magic the Gathering 30th anniversary set and that I didn't think it was such a big deal. And I was thinking about buying stuff. And that was a while ago. And my opinions and thoughts have really changed since then. And mainly that's been like, Rudy from Alpha Investments came out and made all his videos talk about Magic the Gathering 30th, how he wasn't going to buy it and how he recommended to other people not buying it. So I decided to do that. And then I think James from Z&G Emporium also made a video talking about not that he wasn't going to buy Magic the 30th anniversary set, but he wasn't going to consign it. So if you guys did grade the cards, he just wanted to accept it as a consignment thing. So I thought that was interesting. I thought it was like, and listening to Magic players talk, it really made me feel like, okay, I could see how they are upset. And because we are just this very passionate group, right? Like that's what we are at the end of the day. Like, trust me, anybody who sits down and cares about Pokemon or Magic or any TCG in general and sits down and listens to multiple hour-long lives, they're probably pretty vested in that game and they actually care about it and they want to see it succeed and they want to see it be successful. So Magic the Gathering, hurt a lot of their fans. So if the fans were asking for it, it was very easy for me to pass. Now, maybe is there money to be made for that product? Yeah, probably. Did that product sell out relatively quickly? Yes, it did. But this is a crazy thing. And this is the thing that really hit me the hardest afterwards because I don't have much vested in Magic if anything. I do own like a very, very small amount of sealed Magic product, nothing to write home about. And a lot of the Magic I own is relatively modern stuff that I thought I got at a relatively cheap price after a lot of stuff crashed. I'm not vested in Magic at all, but I did look at what was going on and I thought to myself, what if this was Pokemon? And one of the things that happened was when Magic released their 30th anniversary set, it was up on their website for 30 minutes before it was unavailable. Now, there was some fishy stuff that went on. It went unavailable in like multiple different countries at the same exact time. So it didn't appear that it actually sold out. It just appeared that Magic made it unavailable. And because you have to remember like different countries have different distribution centers. So their allotments are going to be different, depending on where you are in the world. And all that makes sense. But to see it all become unavailable, like 4 different places around the world all became unavailable at the exact same minute, a little fishy. But I definitely was well aware of it. But this is the craziest thing. So when I thought about what if I was a Magic player, how would I feel? So what was it supposed to be? So throw out all your biases, right? So throw out your biases of that it was a money grab from Wizard of the Coast, that they're just trying to pump their numbers, that they're really hurting their true player base, that they're only really going after collectors, investors, and they're ignoring like such a large majority of their hobby, the people that can't afford $1,000 product. Like, let's just ignore all that. Let's just think about what happened with that product. What happened with that product was it was a 30th anniversary set. It should be there to celebrate stuff and to celebrate 30 years of Magic the Gathering. 30 years, especially when it comes to trading card games, is unheard of. And really, Magic is the first real true trading card game. And yes, you can definitely get like into the semantics that maybe there was other trading card games that might have existed in the past and stuff like this. But when it boils down to it, the really true successful one, so one that really proved it lasted, over time, was Magic the Gathering. And when I think of Magic the Gathering, I think of Magic the Gathering as being like this established hobby because I'm looking at it from Pokemon. Pokemon just celebrated its 25th anniversary. In reality, we're not separated by that far or that many years. It's like a half a decade. which is not a long time. And that will be like the topic of this video, is whether or not Magic and Pokemon, are we really established hobbies? But, before we get to that point, I want to talk a little bit more about what it was. It was a 30th anniversary set. It was supposed to celebrate Magic. And yeah, you can get into, the reserve list and why the reserve list is special, because that's more or less Magic coming out and saying to all their collectors and their investors, hey, listen, if you believe in this card game, if you believe in like our word, we are never going to reprint this stuff. We are never going to even make like, reprints with different backs that aren't tournament legal and all this stuff. They went out of their way and said all that, but then changed their mind. But it still doesn't change what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be this 30th anniversary. It's supposed to be a celebration of 30 years of the most important, most, like crucial historical trading card game in the history of our hobby. And that's what it was, if you boiled it down to what it should have been. Now, that celebration of Magic was only available for 30 minutes. That is a slap in the face to every single collector, investor, person that cares about that game. That is a slap in the face, meaning that something that was a product that was created, when you break down everything as a celebration of this TCG of Magic the Gathering, it's something to be celebrated. Historical thing, a reprint of Black Lotus, a reprint of the Power Nine, all your Moxes and stuff. It's a celebration, and they made it available for 30 minutes. Now, what does that mean? Is Magic going to come back out and Wizard of the Coast are going to reprint this 30th anniversary product and make it available again? Maybe not reprint it, but make it available again. I don't know. But man, talk about a lackluster anniversary. Or because when you think about like a product having an anniversary, a 30th anniversary, you're almost thinking about like, a party. And I think Pokemon did it the best when they named celebrations exactly that, celebrations. When I think about Pokemon's 25th anniversary, I think about it as being a celebration, because that's what we were doing as a hobby. And we had just came out of one of the craziest times in the history of this hobby. A time in 2020 that had almost no comparables to it. Yeah, some people wanted to compare it to 2016 and Pokemon Go, and some people want to compare it to 1999 and that original boom, but they're not fair, even one-to-one comparisons. So when Pokemon named it Celebrations, that's exactly how it felt. And all the products more or less were available to people. Yes, and I know people will bring up the like the Celebrations UPC and how extremely hard that was to get. And I'm not going to lie, that product we all know was extremely hard. But for the rest of Celebrations, whether it was, the boxes or the ETBs, like Pokemon Center had multiple restocks of Celebrations ETBs. Like if anybody wanted Pokemon Celebrations, you had your chance. And then we saw reprints or restocks as recently as like a month or two ago where where Walmart got a bunch of the Lance's V's Charizard boxes. Like Celebrations was there. If anybody truly wanted Celebrations, they had their options, and they had multiple waves of this, and it was there. And realistically, if for whatever reason you missed out on Celebrations, you can still pick it up at a relatively cheap price. And yes, I get it. The the UPC was very hard to get, but let's not pretend like the UPC wasn't potentially available to people. The UPCs had restocks on Pokemon Center, on Walmart.com, on Target, on Amazon, on Best Buy. Like that Celebrations UPC was out there. It was just very hard to get, but that's only one product of a very large set. Like I said, yes, you might not have been able to get your gold medal Charizard and Pikachu, but you were still able to experience Celebrations because that's what it was. But now, fast forward to what we just saw happen yesterday with Magic. That didn't feel like a celebration. It didn't feel like an anniversary. It felt like a very closed off, tight window. So for Magic to celebrate 30 years, that's 3 decades of that trading card game. their celebration or their magical product, that anniversary product, was now potentially only going to have been available for one 30-minute window of one day. And probably a lot of people were either priced out of that or didn't even have the option to. I mean, honestly, if people really wanted it, like, you could have got it because a lot of people just clicked into the queue just for the curiosity factor of could they get this product if they wanted, and everybody did. I know, like, the wait times are between like 1 minute and 5 minutes, the little queue that Wizard of the Coast would put you in if you wanted that product. But my God, that's how you're going to celebrate 30 years of the most historic trading card game in history, is to put that crazy product. That's what I don't get. So this is me now. I'm just an onlooker of this. I have like I talk about, I have very little vested in it. And because I don't have much vested, I am able to remove myself from the scenario and just look at it from the outside looking in. And I don't get it. I don't understand why did a company do this? Because what I kept thinking about was what the topic of this video is Magic the Gathering is one of the most established TCGs in history, and probably the most established, TCG in history. But then I was thinking, maybe Magic isn't really that established. Maybe Pokemon is not that established. Maybe we are just constantly playing this mental game of gymnastics, right? Because we want to tell ourselves Pokemon is established, Magic the Gathering is established. But in reality, maybe we are just not as established as a hobby as we think, because I think sometimes we might lose sight a little bit about the people that are actively engaged in this hobby, or the people that have been actively engaged in this hobby and continue to be actively engaged in this hobby. And there are the big sellers. I've had a lot of these people on my channel. I've been very blessed to be able to interview these people, to have live chats with some of the biggest collectors in this hobby and some of the people that have been doing it for the longest amount of time. So when I think of this hobby, I think of those people, and I think of like them really creating this and establishing this hobby. But then when I think of how long they were doing it for, maybe since 2010, 2009, so that gives you like a 10 to 15 year window that some of these guys have been in this hobby, really hyper engaged, hyper focused. And I start to think, I'm like, oh man, if the people I think have established this hobby have only been in this hobby for 10 to 15 years, and these are, again, the most engaged people, the most well knowledge and biggest collections, like, have really done like the legwork. If they've only been in this for 10 to 15 years, I struggle sometimes. Is it established? And then so I remove myself a little bit more and I said, okay, well, when I think about Magic the Gathering, is Magic the Gathering established? And then, like I said, you only kind of remove yourself like by another 5 years. So maybe instead of people being in, for the real long term, you got 10, 15, 20 years. But the weird thing about Magic the Gathering, the weird thing about Pokemon, when you talk about being an established hobby, is the one common factor both these TCGs have. And when you talk to people and you hear their backstories and you hear about like how engaged they are in the hobby, everybody has more or less the same story, where at some point during that timeline, they were in the hobby, they were super engaged, but then they left the hobby. And most people have this like pretty long timeline in between, from like whether they were in 99 with base set Jungle Fossil, or they got in a little later, in like 2000, end of 2003 and started with like the Nintendos and your Ruby Sapphires and your Sandstorms or your Dragons, or in 2008, 2009, and they get into, like your Diamond and Pearls, and then your Heart Gold Soul Silvers and your Black and Whites, and then the XYs and the Sun and Moons and the Sword and Shield. No matter what timeline, like there's a bunch of sets they missed. So they weren't like having any impact and establish in this hobby. And for a while, when you really study this hobby and you look at this hobby, like there are these faltering timelines of this hobby where, whatever kind of establishment this hobby had, it starts to unravel a little bit in different timelines, especially when you look at like the real downtimes, like right at the end of WotC, right at the beginning of Nintendo taking over. Those are real hardcore downtimes. And I've talked about it, and I've had people on my channel that were there, that were at 2003 player appreciation tournaments. We're at 2003 Nintendo Worlds, that we're at these, tournaments where there wasn't a lot of people there, where the hobby itself wasn't very large. There was a conversation, mainly on the playability back then, and they weren't even sure if these WotC sets, the end of the WotC, your Expeditions, Aquapolis, Skyridge, if they were even going to be tournament legal after Nintendo took over. Like, these are hardcore downtimes in the hobby. And a lot of this information I get from people because I already said it before. During some of those timelines, I just was not involved in this hobby. I was not engaged, so I don't know what happened. So I have to find all this information out from other people. But it constantly brings up, what does it take? Like, what is an established hobby? And you think about like what happened in 2020 and 2021 and this like crazy boom. And I think when we talk about boom, we think about maybe more like the bubble talk, right? Like booming, like prices booming, like that investability where the investors come in. And even some of the most like well-established hobbies, I would think in my head. So I'm starting to think of like, well, what's like a pretty well-established hobby? And then you have stuff like the coin market and stuff. And the coin market is a very well-established hobby. It's been around for years and will probably continue to be around for years and years. But when you look to like, the 1980s, there was a crazy bubble that happened with graded coins in 1980. And I just told you that coins is arguably one of the most established hobbies in all of collectibles is coins. But even the most well-established hobby that exists also went through this crazy hype period, crazy bubble period where prices went absolutely, out of this orbit into outer space, out of this galaxy kind of stuff. And then they retraced. And some of those prices where coins spiked in the 1980s, those prices are still historic highs. And I think for Pokemon, I think we could point to a lot of examples where there are a few cards out there that probably come to a lot of the top of your people's heads, like, Pikachu first edition from Jungle or Eevee first edition from Jungle, like the two main glaringly bright shining stars out there in the galaxy that are like, we're going to be at our highest in 2020 and we're probably never going to retrace or we're never going to make it back to these prices. Like, there are those examples. So I'm like, it's interesting because when you look at what I consider other established hobbies and then you look at what happened in Pokemon, it doesn't bother me too much in the sense that, the graded coin market continued to go up and coins are still a thing. Pokemon's still going to be a thing, but it goes back to that conversation of, are we established? I think what's happening is we want to tell ourselves, because we want to reinforce that in our own heads that like the hobby we're in makes sense, that the plays we're doing make sense. But I think what's happening is Pokemon is still just establishing itself. And I just don't think we are quite there yet. I think we are on the cusp of something great. And I think for a while, Magic was potentially at the same, area where Magic was already like what I considered to be an established card game. But again, the more you dive into it and you look at like when people were getting in and out and, the ebbs and flows and the ups and downs of the market, and then looking at other historic stuff. But at least in the trading card hobby, you can say it's probably one of the most established thing. But then you look at like, okay, if you do believe it was established, the peak should have been 2020, 2021, because all trading card games experience this boom. But coming out of that, one of the most established hobbies, we're watching it literally unravel before our eyes. And it makes me nervous because if I think that is the most established trading card in whether or not it is truly established or not, but at least from a trading card game perspective, for me looking at it, I look at it as being the most established. I get nervous. I'm like, could these exact same, scenarios, exact same way this is all playing out, can this exact same scenario happen with Pokemon? And to be honest with you, I'm not really sure, because it boils down. But then now, the reason why I'm not sure is because I think what's happening with Magic was a lot of that really happened from a management standpoint, like how that business was ran, how they were pumping out sets, how they started going like the serialized card route, how they started making like more premium products, how they like all these secret layers and stuff like that, and changing the formats. And now they're going to go back and start potentially a reprint and reserve list. Whether or not they actually do that, they obviously did it during the 30th anniversary set, and going to see how that plays out. And maybe Magic moving to this more premium route, which these secret layers and stuff like that, that's kind of what that is. It's like a premium, expensive product. And all those decisions are boiled down to like from management, right? So that's why I said I don't see Pokemon doing that. But who's to say that Pokemon doesn't make that decision? Like we take a pretty far leap hoping that Pokemon doesn't make the same, mistakes, the same decisions, the same choices that Magic the Gathering does. That's why every time somebody in a chat says, what do you think about serialized cards? Do you think Pokemon's going to make serialized cards? And while I think that it is a possibility in the future of this hobby that we may see serialized cards, whenever somebody asks me that question, I always say, but God, I hope not. I hope and pray in this hobby we never see serialized cards, because if we do, more likely than not, there was a catalyst that means those serialized cards are needed because maybe sales are dropping and Pokemon just, needs to create that artificial chase, which that's all serialized cards are, to create that artificial chase and make people want to buy more of this product to really go after it. And that always scares me, the thought of that, because I always think, okay, the second we get there, the only way we get there means we had to get there. And that means it'll probably be like a pretty bumpy road to get to that point. And I look at, and people say like, should chases be tougher? And I don't know, because right now, how big the market is, because Pokemon, the market right now is a freaking juggernaut. It is. And I know people want to look at like 2020 prices, 2021 prices. Yes, those are crazy expensive prices. We've definitely seen prices retrace since that point. But don't fool yourself. Right now, Pokemon is a juggernaut. When you compare, now excluding the end of 2020, 2021, excluding those two crazy outlier years, excluding 1999, the boom of booms, removing those years and just looking at 2022 and comparing 2022 to almost every single other year in the history of this hobby, looking at sales, looking at demand, looking at the dollar amounts just flowing through this hobby, comparing 2022 to every other year in the history of this hobby, 2022 blows it away by like a mile. Like it's not even a fair race. That's how crazy 2022 is. And I'm looking on eBay all the time, and I'm looking at the amount of like booster boxes being sold. And I don't have to go back that far. I could just go back to like Silver Tempest booster boxes or Lost Origin booster boxes, literally the last two sets of Pokemon, and look at how much sales, sometimes single sellers have. Like your P Football Pete's, just looking how many booster boxes is just P Football Pete moving, excluding everybody else. And you look at how many booster boxes one seller on, obviously eBay being the largest selling platform in the world, but just watching what one seller is moving between those two sets, you're like, holy crap, that is more sales of a single booster box by one seller in all times that ever existed in the history of this hobby. There was nobody moving that sort of product. Or, if you did have people, there weren't as many as there are today. So when you look at this and you're like, wow, there's this much demand. Now, I don't know how much of that demand is from you or me or people that don't know much about Pokemon, or if it's from like how much of that demand's getting eaten up by like the whatnot breaks and stuff. And, you can't ignore these. There's like a lot of parts now. This hobby there's a lot, like it used to be a couple gears. You think about like if you opened up like a watch or a pocket watch and you look in the back and you see all the gears turning. In the past, it was only like a couple gears were back there turning. And you can more or less like point to every gear and say, okay, like this gear turns this and this makes this watch move. And just like all the gears make this hobby move. But now You open up the back of that watch and there's 100 more gears back there. And now in this hobby, we're trying to do the same thing. We're still trying to look at each gear and figuring out what they do. But we're just adding, new parts. We're adding new collectors. We're adding old collectors. We're asking modern product investors now, modern product sealed investors, your Twitter groups, your Discord buyout groups, your whatnot groups, your single market, your, LGSs, your monster eBay sellers, your LGSs that are not brick and mortar are strictly online only. There's like all these different pieces that, while maybe a couple of them existed in the past, they didn't exist at the scale. So we're trying to navigate this, because while we might tell ourselves Pokemon's established, it's established in the point that there's a foundation. I think I'll give you that. When we talk about Pokemon, if we want to talk about Pokemon being an established hobby, I will say that there has been now a foundation established in Pokemon. And I've talked about this, or I've alluded to it in other videos, that there is this foundation of Pokemon, because in order for Pokemon to have the exponential growth it had in 2020, 2021, that's impossible to happen if there wasn't already some stuff moving on in the background. And there was. Prices pre-2020 were creeping up. Sealed product, creeping up. Created card market, creeping up. Some of these vintage cards, some of these definitely more high-end cards, definitely 100% were creeping up. So there was that foundation. And now because that foundation existed, like the hobby in 2020 and 2021, 2022 was able to build upon that foundation. So maybe that's where it was established. But now, because it has such a strong foundation, we're going to keep being able to build up. And I think that's what's going to happen with this hobby as a whole. It's just going to continue to build up on itself. And the only way that really happens, when it boils down to it, is you need people to continue to enter this hobby. And I think that's like the big fear, right? The big fear is the bubble happens and then you have mass exodus. Anytime you have a huge influx, you're always going to have a mass exodus leave when prices start to retrace and stuff like that, which is okay. As long as, I always say this, as long as the people that are leaving are less than the amount of people that joined, that's okay. Meaning the hobby's still bigger than where it was. And if it, so now you start to have these people and you start to stack people on there, and then you have new collectors coming in. Like when I look at some of the TCGs that make me the most nervous are the ones that are the fly by the night ones that were, the stonk dog type, TCGs. And I'll say it in a nice way, but like I was critical on MetaZoo in the past. And one of my fears of MetaZoo was never that it was a good TCG or stuff like that. It was just the way that it was being built, the way I felt it maybe wasn't as organic as some people wanted to. And I felt that a lot of people got into that hobby or that TCG as strictly a money play or investability play. And I was afraid that when prices started to retrace, the exodus for a card game would be so massive that whatever was left, whatever that small player base, whatever that true collectible base they had, wouldn't be able to really recover the same way like Pokemon was able to do. Because the crazy thing about Pokemon is, I said the most important thing that happened was Pokemon already had a foundation in pre-2020. Now that true part of that foundation never left. And in fact, a lot of the people that were part of that true foundation were very passive collectors. But even passive collectors were very important to create that foundation, because to have passive collectors and passive investors, meaning you have people that are acquiring and not just selling all the time, not always just, constantly pumping out into the market and killing prices and doing stuff like this, which we see happen all the time now with these super modern plays like the Charizard UPC. Like that is an example of, people flooding the market with a card. Trust me, if every single person who bought a Charizard UPC didn't grade those cards, just sat on them as part of their personal collection, whatever few cards did hit the market would sell for absolute premiums. But that's not what happened. A product like that flooded the market. So, but when you have that base, when you have that foundation, they're going to be around no matter the ebbs and flows of the Pokemon hobby. They're going to stick around. But now the thing about Pokemon is something I've talked about in the past, and something that I think is as vitally important as anything else is Pokemon is a very open door type TCG. If there are no barriers to entry. And a lot of people think that there are like these artificial walls, or like it's a super tight knit, group of collectors, and anybody that wants to be part of that tight knit group of collectors is not allowed and are, shunned or whatever. That is not the case. You can talk to any single person that ever went to like a collecticon, met up at least with this group, this like area of the hobby we are in. Pokemon is one of the most like open arm accepting hobbies that exist out there. Everybody's welcome. So when you have that foundation that everyone is welcome to join, that foundation just gets like bigger and bigger and thicker, and it's going to help ride out storms way better. But now this is the thing. That's why Pokemon is so established. But you could have, every time I use the word Pokemon, I feel like, and I would have said, you could have just replaced Pokemon with the word magic for everything I said. But for whatever reason's happening, is that foundation, which is Magic the Gathering, there are cracks starting to, appear in that foundation at such a fast rate. And I don't know if it's because we live in like the YouTube, like sphere, and Rudy's making his videos, and, you could read the comments section of Magic the Gathering videos, or like Ruxin34, who did open up some of that Magic product, was, given to it by Wizard of the Coast, but wasn't really super familiar with like all the macro stuff that was going on in their hobby and how upset everybody was. And then Rudy made his video talking like, Wizard of the Coast even reached out to Leonhardt, obviously Leonhardt being a Pokemon guy, but the only reason you have to reach out to these people, reach outside of your core group of people, is because all these cracks are happening in that foundation of that hobby. But I just get nervous. Like, is this possible that this is just going to be a case study for Pokemon? I don't know. And like I said, when I look at the most established hobbies, Magic the Gathering is always the one I went to. So I don't have like a perfect answer for this. And I'm sure a lot of Magic the Gathering people will make videos talking, maybe not exactly like word for word, but like talking about the things that I brought up, in their way, a way more educated way, because I'm not as familiar with Magic the Gathering. Like I talk about Magic, I always say I talk about it in the most passive way possible, but I'm also looking at it as a bystander or somebody looking at it from the outside looking in and trying to figure out like what's going on and how can stuff like that happen as quickly as it did happen. Because remove yourself like a year or two ago, Magic was in a pretty healthy place. Magic was having record sales. I don't know. So that was my rant for today. Now my goal is I'm going to go up. I'm going to read the chat. I'm going to see if any of you guys wrote comments, or see if you guys like put any of your takes in here. Let's see. So John Doe said, it's hard to justify $1,000 when those cards probably cost 10 cents to produce. Yeah. Well, you can say that about any card. You can look at, if you want to just go to the price that it costs to, for a printing facility to print a card, that's probably not like a fair argument. You could probably look at like the Moonbryon and say, how much money did it really cost Pokemon to print this textured Moonbryon card? It's probably like close to that, like 10 to 15 cents. So we're going to go on the high and say 15 cents because it is a textured card, but I don't know. But I could see how it's hard to justify that for like a modern product. And we do that every day. So John Doe says he can't disrespect any ladies that might be lurking. Pika Zolt says, I can't imagine an owner that has a Black Lotus. And yep, we're doing a reprint of it. Yeah, see, now this is the thing. So Magic the Gathering, at the end of the day, is a playable game. It's not an investable game, even though when you look at alpha cards, it's really hard to make the argument that alpha cards are playable when they are extremely expensive. So there's definitely parts of Magic that are extremely expensive, are definitely an investability aspect. But their whole thing is Pokemon doesn't have the reserve list. Nintendo never came out, WotC never came out, Pokemon International never came out and said, we're making a reserve list for Pokemon cards that will never be reprinted. Pokemon, we've seen plenty of reprints. And in fact, Pokemon is super accepting of reprints to a point where you would think that the original cards sell for way more, but they don't. And that's because, Pokemon loves their reprints. Base set Charizard, there's been plenty of reprints of base set Charizard. You got base set, so you got just the base set Charizard artwork, first edition, Shadowless, Unlimited, 99 2000, reprinted in base set 2, reprinted in Legendary Collection as a reverse holo, as a non-holo from the Legendary Lava theme deck. Fast forward to Stormfront, it was reprinted with reimagined artwork, still created by Arita. Fast forward now to Evolutions, that base set Charizard artwork was holo, reverse holo. Then as recently as Celebrations, we saw it as the metal card in the Celebrations UPC, and then we saw it reprinted with the 25th anniversary logo on it. Pokemon does not have, and then you could do the same thing with, the base set Pikachu artwork, and, or you could just go back to like, Supreme Victors and Rise and Rivals, and you have the reprints of like the Pikachu artwork and the Hitmonchan artwork, or both, and those are just reimagined artworks, or even like random reprints, like in I was about to say Celebrations. In Generations, you have like the Taurus from Jungle. Yes, like the Taurus. The card nobody was asking to be reprinted. That card was reprinted in Generations, and there's a million other, and then obviously Evolutions, just every single card in the set being reprints. But there's a ton of different cards that were reprinted like a ton of different times, and Pokemon loves it. But we don't have this reserve list. People look at those as Pokemon maybe is definitely a playable TCG. Do not get me wrong. It is definitely like, and the playability aspect of it is increasing. I think, we're going to see like Pokemon Live and all these things really help grow Pokemon. But Pokemon like skirts this fine line of being a playable TCG, but also being a collectible TCG. And then we create like this other third fine line, like that fourth wall, where now we say Pokemon is an investable TCG, which that doesn't, like, those two words shouldn't even like be put next to each other. Trading card game and investability, like those two words should be completely separate and not even close, but we bring them super close together. But I think maybe Pokemon would call it more a collectible TCG, where Magic the Gathering is a playable TCG. I think those are like the huge caveats. But by creating that reserve list, which Wizard of the Coast did, they helped make this collectible, or this playable TCG. They helped make it collectible, because now the only way people can get these reserve list cards is they have to pay a premium for them. Otherwise, they're never going to be able to get them in their decks, because they know that there are no, options or future availability of these cards be released in new sets. It just doesn't exist. So let's see. Next question. Kevin Clare said, Pokemon's doing same thing, PTCG, about a video on some collector box in Pokemon that's $499. I am curious what box he's talking about. Is it like a modern product, Kevin Clare, that he was talking about that's $499? Because I find that to be pretty interesting. Can't think of any products that were ever that much money, with the exception of like, this is a super outlier card, but like during 2016, when there was like the gold base set Pikachu reprint, is not like, when I say gold, I mean like it was made out of 24 karat solid gold, but it was a made to order type thing. It was super expensive. It's a very, very niche product. A lot of people probably don't even know exists, that there are actually like solid gold cards. And I want to say that the MSRP price at the time was like $3,000 for that card. But again, that was like made through like a jewelry store. And that is definitely a Pokemon product, but even though it is in the shape and same artwork as a trading card, it is not a trading card. So that's the only like real product I could think of that was a true premium product. But that is such a niche product those cards nowadays, I think they sell for like $40,000 or $30,000. Like they're super expensive now, but the buyer pool for a card like that, even back then, was super low. And probably today at those higher prices, it's even that much lower. That's more a product like people owned it, they held on to it. So John Doe said, I know if I had an original first edition prize Charizard, I'd be pissed if Pokemon looked to reprint the most expensive cards from that cash grab. That shoots the hobby in the foot. I don't know, John. I just kind of said like Pokemon has reprinted that base set Charizard a lot of times. But when you talk about prize cards, I'm guessing you're talking about trophy cards. So yeah, if Pokemon were to start reprinting trophy cards, but this is the thing too, is I don't think Pokemon would value, like if, let's say Pokemon in Celebrations being a great example. Celebrations did reprint some pretty expensive cards. In Celebrations, Pokemon reprinted, Gold Star Umbreon. One of the, if not, one of the most expensive gold stars that exists. I was going to say the most expensive, but that would be stupid because you have, your Gold Star Charizard and Gold Star Rayquaza, but one of the most expensive gold stars. Let's just say Umbreon's that. And they slapped a 25th anniversary, logo on it. They took a card that was a non-holo card, gave it a textured pattern to it, same back and everything, no difference there, but obviously very clear markers to show that that card is a reprint, is not the original card. And Pokemon and the hobby loved it. I've talked about it in Celebrations. My personal chase card is that Umbreon. Like that's the card that I liked most about that. So the question is, you think about like some of the most expensive trophy cards in this hobby, whether it's, your tropical mega battles or, your your like 97, 98 Pikas, like half art Pikachus, Japanese cards, being some of the most expensive trophy cards that exist, or even the Illustrator Pikachu being more expensive for other more outlier reasons. Maybe it's not the rarest card, but it's definitely the most expensive card, whether people want to like agree with that fact or not. Obviously sales, especially Logan Paul paying, millions of dollars for that card, show that to be a true thing. But if Pokemon did decide to put an Illustrator Pikachu in Celebrations, it doesn't affect the price of that card. Like the original Illustrator Pikachu the price does not get destroyed because it's in Celebrations. The same way that Gold Star Umbreon that was in Celebrations, the original non-holo from Pop Series 5, that the price of that non-holo doesn't get affected because it was reprinted in Celebrations. But this is the thing. For Magic, because Magic look at everything as like more playability and stuff like that, could it affect it? Probably not. But I just think it's pretty funny how like the mindsets of Pokemon collectors are so drastically different than the same mindset of Magic. Because like I said, Pokemon collectors, we love our reprints and we've seen a ton of reprints. In fact, when we get reprints, the hobby kind of gets super excited and loses their mind, especially when we get, the same artworks, but reimagined, like I mentioned earlier in today's video, like in Stormfront, we have reprints of the base set Charmander, Charmeleon, and Charizard, all done by Arita, all reimagined of that artwork. In your Supreme Victors, you have that reimagined base set artwork, like for your secret rares, and that's becomes like secret rares. Or, Surf and Pikachu. Again, you look at like a Surf and Pikachu, which is originally a Black Star promo. Then you have it reprinted as a secret rare, but then it gets reprinted again as a secret rare. The Surf and Pikachu has been reprinted as secret rare twice. It got reprinted in Evolutions as a secret rare the second time. So it went from Black Star promo to secret rare again in Evolutions, which is crazy when you think about it. A card could have two reprints as a secret rare, and people love that card, no matter what. It's just wild to think about, though. So that's how the Pokemon hobby is. We just love cards being reprinted. So I don't know. It's just something to think about. So I don't know how to say your name. A Wathman says, if Magic 30th would have been cheap, accessible, and have reserve list cards, the backlash would have been even worse in his opinion. See, that's interesting. That what he's almost saying is by Wizard of the Coast making that Magic 30th anniversary set a super expensive premium product, making it, $1,000 actually helped not have as much backlash. That is a hot take. That is interesting to say because, like Magic, we've already talked about this in the other video when I talked about Magic, like Magic, yeah. I'm not going to get into it again, but that's an interesting take to think that if it was more, so imagine like Magic 30th being a way more Evolutions type reprint where they just reprinted the entire set and made it available. Interesting. Yeah, I don't really have a perfect answer for that. Kevin Clare said Pokemon should buy back Wizard. That would be dope. Can you imagine if that ever happened? That would be the biggest, oh my God type moment. I wouldn't throw it out of the realm of all things possible because Pokemon is positioning themselves in a super like dominant way right now. And one of the most dominant moves that they could do was buy a printing facility when they did that. And when they bought Millennium Print Group prints a lot of other TCGs, and it was Pokemon position themselves in the ability, position themselves to have the ability that if the market ever went crazy again, that they would be in a fantastic spot to be able to really have more control over those printers. And we've talked about this, like there's probably a lot of contracts that are signed and, printer allocations and all this kind of stuff. And while Pokemon is probably their number one client and gets a ton of priority, they can't just bully people out where there's no backlash at all. Like Millennium Print Group still has to kind of be a little mean to Pokemon, but now they can't. Like now Pokemon just, they put their dick on the table and said, there it is. Like we run this bitch now. So, John Doe said, speaking of celebrations, Walmart now allows us to put up 5 Dark Sylveon boxes in cart if anybody wants celebrations at retail. Wow, that's crazy. So celebrations is still available on walmart.com right now if you want it. That's crazy. So Ray Deep said at PK, that's the argument Perma Bear reserved investments make. The video game industry was still young 30 years in, even if it was extremely profitable. I'm not familiar with who that is, but so that is interesting that he said that it was a similar argument talking about like, is a hobby established? Because when you talk about video games, like video games, I would say video games are a little more than 30 years established. Like you could go back, yes, you could go back from like even just looking at Nintendo and go to what we know as like Super Nintendo and then just regular Nintendo. But then you can go back a little bit before that and you still had like your Ataris and your Pongs and stuff like that and your ColecoVisions and all your super old school stuff like that. So like video games was definitely around, but maybe it wasn't like quite to what Nintendo was able to do. And then, you had Nintendo and then you had Sega at the same time. And that little like competition there, but obviously Nintendo was just such a behemoth opposed to Sega. And then Sega came out with, what did Sega come out with? It was like regular Sega, and then what did they come out with right before Dreamcast? There was like something in between. I forget which Sega, can't even remember. And then goodbye Sega, may they rest in peace. But even like the Sega, you had like the Game Boy, obviously, but then you had the Sega one, which was the handheld one, which I can't. Sega, what the hell was the Sega handheld one? It wasn't the Game Boy. Hell, I wasn't a Sega. You could tell I was a Nintendo kid that I can't even think of like the different ones of Sega. Let's see. And then obviously the PlayStation, and then Sony put their arms in it, and then Sony PlayStations and all the Sony PlayStations that came out. But then you had Xbox came out with Microsoft, and then Microsoft doing their thing until now. You kind of have like your big three for video games, and then Nintendo with the Wii, and then that kind of went back to now what they're with the Switch and stuff. So it's interesting. Or like video games is this interesting hobby too, which you look at Pokemon, you say, or you look at video games and you look at video game collecting, like how really well established is that hobby either? Because there's a lot of stuff to collect. We just talked about like all the different systems that were put out. Let's see. John Doe said, Magic short term, big money grab helps Pokemon more in the long run. Pokemon is doing it right. John Doe also says, looks worse when Magic came out before and said they wouldn't reprint old cards like this. They lost trust. I think I think John Doe's right when he says that. That is the thing that Magic really messed up. Let's see. John Doe says, Rudy is an asset for Magic and they pissed him off with their management. They bit that hard and it helps feed them. Yeah, I am curious where where he's going to draw the line in the sand too, because at the end of the day, Rudy is a Magic guy through and through. So, I see we had Anthony Lopez in the chat. It was good to see you, man. Chris 2X says, what's better for sealed investing, Chill and Rain or Fusion Strike? Just get them both, man. Get them both. Who cares? Get them both. One's going to do good. One's going to do bad. But I recommend, I mean, you kind of missed your opportunity at Chill and Rain. Like Chill and Rain, $80. That was a beautiful entry point. Fusion Strike, both those booster boxes, still beautiful entry points. If you don't own one of them, own one of them. If you're going to do it for sealed investing, like, I don't know. Investing in sealed modern is always like a dangerous game because reprints and stuff like that. But those two booster boxes that you just mentioned, I would say that those, Chill and Rain being the most timeable booster box in all of modern Pokemon, Fusion Strike being pretty close. You definitely had entry points there for both of those. So maybe you kind of missed them. But if you miss the entry points for Chill and Rain, like it's okay to still pick up one at, current prices. What's your downside risk if you pick up Chill and Rain right now, pick up one just for your personal, you're asking investment, so that's different than personal collection. I don't know. Figure out the market and then just go with your gut. See how people are feeling about stuff like that. Let's see. John Doe's going hard in the chat today. I appreciate John. He said, I leaned all into chillin' when it was under 80 and I don't have any fusion booster boxes. Ain't bad, but I put my chips into chillin'. That's pretty funny. So John's probably right around break even point for Chill and Rain right now. And when I say break even, I'm talking like after selling fees and shipping fees. But break even when you're not a distributor, that's not a bad price. So now I think a lot of people are at that break even point for Chill and Rain. A lot of people that bought it at that $80, so now you could cover your eBay fees with what how much that price has increased. You could cover your shipping costs. So now any price that Chill and Rain creeps up from now until inevitability, now until the end of days, you're in a good position because now you're getting to the point where you're actually could potentially make money on that product, where I think most people are just at the break even point. But break even is not a bad place to be when your shipping and fees are included in that break even point. So that's good. Chris 2X says, vintage makes no sense. That is a hot take, Chris. Vintage doesn't make sense. So scarcity and rarity don't make sense to Chris. I like that take. That's a hot take, but I like it, Chris. That vintage makes no sense to you. Rarity and scarcity makes a lot of sense to other people, and demand. I would say a lot of demand too in vintage, depending on the card. If you don't believe that, type in Ancient Muse sales and look at how many Ancient Muse have sold in the last 2 years. If you don't believe that there's demand for vintage, like that's one card you could look at. The fact that that card still to this day sells for greater than $20 to $25 for a card that I don't even know how many Ancient Muse exist, but there will never, and you could quote me on this, there will never come a day when there will not be an Ancient Mew available on the market for sale. Meaning from now until the day I die, there will always be an Ancient Mew available for purchase. That's how many of those things exist, that there will never come a time when they become scarce. But the market still absorbs those cards. So, and that's not rare or scarce, that card. That's just a nostalgic overload for a lot of people. Carson Top says the Moonbreon feels like a hype bubble. Yeah, but it definitely has retraced from its highs of highs. But my God, that Moonbreon is still holding extremely strong for what it is. A card with over 3,000 graded in a 10, like the most. That's for that card to still sell at what it's selling for is a extremely impressive feat. Which, you know, that gives credence to modern Pokemon, of how strong modern Pokemon is when you look at that Moonbreon, and the fact that it's still selling at such a high dollar amount with the huge graded population of that card. That speaks a lot about that card. It speaks a lot about the hobby in general. Like, yeah. Rav Deep said serialized cards suck. Ancient Mew says, I highly doubt Pokemon would do serialized cards. I wouldn't throw it out of the realm of all impossible like Ancient Mew, but I don't see a reason why they need to do it, at least at this juncture in time. Like, no reason. So Mick says Pokemon has rarely fumbled. I doubt they would make such a big change to the process of collecting sets. Pokemon rarely fumbles. Yes, Pokemon really fumbles from like an artwork, but so Pokemon has definitely 100% made big changes to the process of collecting the sets. Like, so I don't really understand exactly what you mean. Maybe like you could let me know down below like what exactly you meant, but Pokemon, when it comes to collecting sets, 100% has made it extremely hard in comparison. When you go back in time and you look at like your base set Jungle Fossil, base set was 102 cards. Jungle was 63 cards. Fossil was right around the same. It was like 62 or 63 cards. For base set, there was only 16 hollows in base set. One of those, being the Machamp, came in the 2-player starter deck. So really out of a booster box, you could only pull, 15 of those hollows. But out of a booster box, you're going to pull, assuming you don't pull doubles, 12 out of 15. So in reality, it only takes like 1.5 to 2 booster boxes to complete that entire base set of 102 cards. Now, fast forward to modern Pokemon, forget about it. It is impossible to complete, modern day sets by opening just 1 to 1.5 to 2 booster box. Impossibility when you look at the amount of, V's and secret rares and alternative arts and gold cards and every other like chase factor that Pokemon has put in. It makes it like next to impossible. And so Pokemon has definitely made, collecting sets. They have definitely changed that. And, you can go back not too far to like Heart Gold Soul Silver base. I talked about this in a very recent videos. Like Heart Gold Soul Silver base was not even that hard of a set to complete. We watched PokeRev open up a god box of it and really like put into perspective how it wasn't that hard. There's only 2 secret rares in Heart Gold Soul Silver. 6 if you want to include like the legend cards, the Lugia and the Ho-Ho, the top half and the bottom half. But really, there's only 2 secret rares, the 1 card and then the secret rare Gyarados. And you had 6 prime cards and then the 4 legendary cards. Like it wasn't huge sets. Nowadays, we're talking hundreds upon hundreds of cards and sets. And especially when you add in secret rares and stuff like that, oof, it gets hard. And we've seen people try. Again, shout out to PokeRev. We've seen him now 2 sets in a row, whether it was Lost Origins and what he did to the Aerodactyl V alt-art price, because he wasn't able to pull that out of however many. It was like 76 or 78 booster boxes he opened before he finally got it. And now the same thing with Silver Tempest, how monster set, and even Fusion Strike or, Evolving Skies, stuff like this. Like Evolving Skies right now, yeah, prices are super high, but to complete these sets, it's an uphill battle. So Pokemon has definitely changed definitely made big changes to the process of collecting sets. But that's where like the secondary market comes in and stuff like that. So the Zard Hunter said you need to get P Football Pete on a live. I've recently reached out to him again, like since my most recent live. So I've reached out to him again, and I'm just gonna end up probably going there in person. Ancient some people I just read Ancient Mew had a real tinfoil hat there. He said PK is P Football Pete. No, I wish. Darth Grader said is P Football Pete a known person? Yeah, his name's Scott, man. He's a known person. He's a good guy. He's a crazy guy, but I like him. I can't wait to get him on. Let's see. Ancient Muse. Yeah, a lot of people are just saying that they bought a lot from him. Oh, I'm gonna real quick hop down to the bottom of the chat because Slab Podcast says, do you ever imagine a TCG crossover with Disney? Like when you say imagine a TCG crossover, I gotta ask you, are you talking about like Pokemon crossing over with Disney? Then the answer would be no. But like, could we see Disney make other TCG or like I don't really understand the question because we know that Disney's coming out with their new TCG and how what is it? The Lorcana TCG and how crazy like, the promo cards for that is selling for right now. And then, there are like your Weiss had like, I guess it was like Pixar. So Pixar is owned by Disney, but there was like that crossover for Weiss, and Disney's had a lot of TCGs in the past, but like, do I ever see Disney crossing over with Pokemon? No, I don't see that happening. If anything, I think we can see more crossovers with Pokemon to like Nintendo assets, very, again, us being English collectors, we have that constant. There's 3 words in this hobby that hurts English collectors more than anything else. And those 3 words that hurt English collectors more than anything else is Japanese, Pikachu, promos. When you put those 3 words in order, nothing is more painful for an English collector to hear, because think about all the great Japanese Pikachu promos that exist that we never saw in English. And one of the huge crossovers there, when I say about, Pokemon crossing over with Nintendo, is like that Mario, Luigi, Pikachu crossover. So I think that would be more likely than anything else, seeing more of those type crossovers. I've always personally said, if I could have my dream Pokemon crossover, it would just be a Pokemon Super Smash crossover. So every single player that's in Super Smash that is a available player for you to play in the game, you can just have some Pokemon dressed up as a Super Smash player, so that like opens up, Zelda's and Link's and Donkey Kong, and then obviously Mario and Luigi again, but then like Samus and just there's, and then even like Snake too. I know Snake is a playable in Super Smash now. Like imagine a Pikachu as Snake from Metal Gear Solid. That card doesn't exist right now, but if it did, I would want to own it. And in fact, I would want to buy the shit out of a Super Smash Pokemon crossover. It would be next to impossible for Pokemon to actually mess that up. It would literally be one of the coolest crossover. And if they just made it as like a standard set and every single card was a crossover, oh my God, people would lose their freaking minds. The hits of that set would be, forget about it. Like, the sky is the limit for a set like that, a Super Smash crossover. So to answer your question, I think maybe that would be, if that's the question you're asking. I haven't seen you write in the chat since you posted that, so I don't know if that's what you meant or not. You didn't really clarify. But yeah, somebody said now, yeah, a Bowser Pikachu, Samus Pikachu, Snake is OP. They're saying Link Pikachu would go hard. Chugs called it a Linkachu. That would be sweet. A lot of people saying crossover set. Yeah, that would be sick. But we've seen it happen in a way. Like the Mario, Pikachu, Luigi promos. We've seen them happen again. Japanese Pikachu promos, the 3 words that all English collectors hate to hear, but we've seen it happen. So it's not impossible, meaning it doesn't mean that Pokemon couldn't do it. Now, that will be the Pokemon printers going bird mode. Pokemon will print money if they ever do a crossover set. Like, that will be a set that will be fun to open from now until I feel like eternity. Like, I don't even know what the current Super Smash lineup is, but it's got to be some crazy heavy hitters. And if you could, like, yeah, people are just saying like the hand Pikachu, like just the hand from Super Smash Brothers. But yeah, there's like Fox or Falco. If you guys like Star Fox 64 and stuff, like I was a big Star Fox 64 fan, but like a Fox, I don't even know, maybe like a Fox Charmander, that would be pretty sick. Or if they just had a card with Pikachu, but he had the mallet from Super Smash, like even that would be sick. Or Kirby, and then obviously Jigglypuff already exists, but and then Clefairy. Oh, dude, it'd be sick. All right. Let's see. So I'm gonna scroll back up. So I hope I answered your super chat. You didn't like follow up, so I hope I answered it the way you were looking for it. But yeah, like I think Lacana is gonna be able to just do for Disney what Disney does, and that will be a very, cross Disney IP type thing. But I don't ever think we'll see a Pokemon one. Oh yes. I couldn't think of the other Sega. It was Sega Saturn. Thank you for whoever wrote Sega Saturn. All right. I hope I scrolled up fast enough. So Carson Top says, it feels like Magic is so money focused. So reprints are looked down on since it messes with their investment versus Pokemon being less money / investment focused. No, I think you're right. Darth Grader said, one of the issues rampant in publicly traded companies, execs get judged on quarters, get the short-term profit, the kudos and bonuses that go with it. Get the hell out of Dodge before it falls apart. So I think that what Darth is saying is maybe like what Magic is doing is that true money grab. And this is the thing too, like Magic, or when I say Magic, really I'm talking about Mattel and I'm talking about Wizard of the Coast, but my God, that, or not, I said Mattel. Oh my God, it's Hasbro owns them. But anyways, their stock is getting absolutely beat to shit right now. So, and Magic really is that golden goose for them. So it's not a good look for executives and stuff like that when, your highest earning intellectual property is just going down the drain. That's the thing too, is if they're not willing to change, if they're not willing to adapt, because from everything I've heard, like the interviews that they have made, the interviews have more or less said like, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. And if people don't like it, people could go kick rocks, more or less. That is not a good look. That is pretty scary that they said that, or in not so many words. Gakkel A said, what's scary is that Pokemon tried to introduce a new type of premium product line with the Celebration / Zard UPCs when the MSRP is $40 above normal MSRP for this type of product. Gakkel A, I would not say that is true. There have been a lot of premium products. I mean, you don't have to go back that far. You can go back to Dragon Majesties had super premium collections. Generations had a bunch of premium collection boxes. Hidden Fates had obviously like the huge premium collection box that was $99 at MSRP. And yes, it had the Shining Rayquaza in it and Hidden Fates. That product, I don't even know I want to say that's probably like close to $700 to $800, ultra premium collection box. But there are super premium collections before ultra premiums. So like Dragon Majesty super premium collection box was $79.99. And then, so let's just call it $80. And then the Hidden Fates ultra premium was $100. And now what we're seeing with Celebrations was $120. So we saw a $20 price increase from Dragon Majesty to Hidden Fates, and then another $20 in price increase to Celebration. So I wouldn't say like it's that scary what Pokemon has really done. So I don't think it's that bad. So Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think it's just normal price increases because, from Dragon Majesty to Hidden Fates, like you just have normal price increases. And then from Hidden Fates to so that's 2018 to 2021, 22. That's like 3 to 4 year gap to go up in price, like $20. And it's hard to like compare what's inside. Like, yeah, I don't think it's that bad. Um, let's see. Oh yeah, Game Gear. That's what. Thank you guys. See, if it wasn't for you guys, I'd be lost. So yes, Nintendo had Game Boy and Sega had Game Gear. Thank you guys. Yeah. So people are talking about like, yeah, Sega Genesis and Sega Saturn. So I never owned Sega Saturn, but my cousin had Sega Saturn and he had the game. It's like the one where you're the cop. I'm gonna need your help again. It's the one where you're the cop. It was like a super famous arcade game. And then like you would have the revolver one at the arcade. God damn it. I can't think of the name of it. But that was the game he had. And I always used to play it at the arcade because, yes, I am still old enough that I do remember arcade games. Like, I didn't go to arcades all the time, but I definitely remember that game. Just the same way I remember, like, going to the movie theater and playing Area 51. And if you guys don't know what Area 51 is, I feel bad for you. But Area 51 was one of those great arcade games slash, like, movie theater type games. But yeah, I forget which game it was, but he had it on Sega Saturn. And every time I go over his house, that's all I ever wanted to play was that game. Um, let's see. Yeah, a lot of people answering that. Kevin Clare said PS2 killed it at the moment in time because the DVD player was more than a PS2. Yes, I was a Nintendo guy and all my friends had PS2s and I was so jealous because they like had DVD players, but I was like, I have a like how I bought my DVD players, a long story, but like it's funny. That's funny when you look back on like things that were important to you back then versus now. Like, yes, having a DVD player in a PS2 was a big deal. The things we take for granted now, like most people would just some of the new, if I don't know if Colson's out there, Colson's probably like DVD players, huh? Trust me, man, we could go back and talk about like VHS tapes. All right, I'll show you how old I am. I used to have a automatic rewinder for VHS tapes. Like you would watch the movie, you would pull it out of your VCR. Then I had like this little, it was like a black box and it would flip up and then you would slide your VHS tape into the rewinder and then you would push down on it and it would automatically rewind the VHS for you. And that was top of the line. That was big time living type stuff to have your own VHS rewinder. So that's how far back I go. So my voice might sound like a 13-year-old, but trust me, I'm not that young. Hashtag PK sounds like he's 14. So if you guys are watching this after the fact and you've made it this far in the video, I don't know how you've done it. You're like an hour and 12 minutes into this crazy live/rant. If you are watching this after the fact, do me a favor in the comments right now, right? Hashtag PK sounds like a 13, 14-year-old. You guys are the best though. And if you made it this far in this video, or if you guys are watching this right now, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Hitting the like button is like, if you like a YouTuber, if you like their content, like that's the biggest thing you can do. Like forget about even subscribing. Like subscribing is cool because that means YouTube will recommend their videos to you. But by liking the video, that's what you could do because then it like pops through the algorithm, then it will potentially suggest this video to other people, and then other people learn about the channel, blah, blah, blah. Chris 2X said 14 alt arts and $1,000 or $100 box is insane. Yeah. So Catch 'em All Collectible says, I mean, I bought both. I'm fine with both. But when you listen to some of what he said about 30th Magic the Gathering, it's a bit hypocritical given 6.9 kits in his opinion. That's interesting. I don't agree with you, Dan. I agree with Dan on a lot of stuff. You're going to compare Magic the Gathering set, the 30th anniversary, which is the product to celebrate 30th anniversaries of one of the most historic trading card games in history, a company that said they would never reprint reserve cards and compare it to Rudy, like a YouTuber making like a specialty 6.9 product where he went out of his way and told everybody, he like made multiple videos telling people like they weren't going to make money on that product. Hypocritical. I don't know. That's a hot take, man. You're trying to compare Rudy to Wizard of the Coast? I don't know. I don't know if I can get on board with that, man. I like you, but that's a stretch, don't you think? To compare Rudy to Wizard of the Coast, and like Rudy's a one-man business, man. Like Rudy has a YouTube channel where all he talks about is like finances. And if trust me, if people could get sued for talking about finances, like Rudy would be top of the list of like getting sued if like this market was more regulated or not. So for him to make a product that was for money, I don't know. I can't get behind that. Sorry. That's if you ever want to come on though, like maybe in the future, I would love to like have that conversation with you because I think that's interesting. Let's see. So Danny said, did anybody buy Magic the 30th? I did not. I decided to pass. Zard Hunter said, I can't wait to see those comments in your Magic the Gathering 30th opening video. Oh, Dan's opening it? Oh, well, that's interesting. So that might be why Dan has the hot take if Dan did buy it. So it would be interesting if Dan did buy the Magic the Gathering 30th, and that is why he has that take. Interesting. It's interesting. Girls Like My Hair. What a great name you have. Girls Like My Hair. He says, have you heard of Pokemon Old Maid? And if so, do you think it's a good investment? Oh boy. Do I oh, hold on. These are just right in front of me. Do I do you hear this? There's a reason why all those Old Maid boxes are currently empty, because every single one of those cards is currently at PSA right now. So investment though, no. Flippability, yes. Don't think they're investments though. And those are I don't have the rest. I had a box delivered to me in the mail from Japan. It was like a box just filled with Old Maid cards. So the market will be oversaturated with those things very quickly. If you think prices of those are sustainable, they are not. So to answer, are they investable? No. Why do I know that? Because we will kill that market. I will kill that market. There are a lot of people out there who are doing exactly what I did. We're going to kill that market. That market is done. I think like my cards are still at grading right now, but when they come back, that market, stick a fork in it, it's done. Especially, some of the real early sales people buying like the Muse from, that's boxes shipped less than $20. You get 2 Mews in it. You get the Gengar, the Mew sold for $222 at a PWCC auction because they're playing cards. They all grade 10s. They're like super good quality. Like maybe you get a couple that are all centered, but they're going to grade 10s if you know what you're looking at, especially with how many I bought. Like I got piles of the ones that I didn't send. Like these are ones I didn't send because I felt like they were a little off-centered. Shout out to my boy though, Raichu. But they are definitely not investments. These are not, and I quote it. I quote me, they are not investments. Like you get one of those per box, but they're not investments. Don't invest in these. Please don't. I'm going to kill the market. There's other people out there watching this video that are going to destroy that market. That market is gone. It's done. That's funny though that you asked that. I feel like I've been talking about this now on a lot of chats. There's other cards that I will kill the market too. I don't know. Do I want to show you cards? Sure. There's more. Trust me, there are markets out there that that will be destroyed. There's just some plays right now. Don't worry, that's nothing. I got plenty of those cards away at Great Intel, so can't show all my plays. I got to stop doing that. Show all my plays. Eventually, like the market's just gonna be oversaturated with everything. Let's see. Yeah. Don't worry, nobody makes it to this far in these lives anyways. The viewer retention after 30 seconds just goes like this, so. Let's see. Chris2X says, it literally takes just one more person like Logan Paul to open up a Pokemon box to be right back to another boon. Insane if you think about how that works. Yes and no. I think there's merit to that. I think there's definitely merit to that, but it would have to be somebody who has never dealt with Pokemon, who has like a huge influence, could really pump that market. But like, there's no denying that huge social media influence has an impact on this hobby. And, I don't even know who it would have to be. It'd have to be like, who's like a famous person that has millions of subscribers who aren't in Pokemon right now? Like, I don't know. I don't even know. Like a Kendall Jenner, like that types. What does she have? Like 60 million subscribers or something, followers? Like if can you imagine? It would have to be somebody so far out of who normally opens up Pokemon. It would have to be like a totally different group of people. So to bring all their fans into Pokemon at one time, and then to create like really high prices, it'd have to be stupid fans. Sorry. Like I'm sorry to all the Kendall Jenner fans out there, but they would have to be like people that are not familiar with the Pokemon market and would just come in and have dumb money, buying up stupid stuff, paying stupid prices because they wouldn't be familiar with the Pokemon market, wouldn't be familiar with the Pokemon hobby, would just get in because some big celebrity person that they like is buying this stuff. Like that's what it takes. And then when that happens, if you are positioned well in this hobby, then it's just fucking strap a rocket ship to your back. Like it's blast off for you if that happens. Let's see. JB Kane says, in my opinion, we'll likely find out where the hobby real long-term trajectory is headed in the next 12 to 18 months when we see a likely economic downturn that impacts more average income individuals. Maybe. It'll be interesting to see how that happens. He also said, in the couple of years that follow, the excess liquidity still hasn't been flushed out, which has a large impact in some of the hobby. Yeah. Or just the big, there's those. I said for English Pokemon collectors, there's 3 words that scare or that we hate: Japanese Pikachu promos. But for world economy, especially, you can always have 2 words: hyperinflation. You never want hyper and inflation said in the same sentence back to back. So if we ever saw hyperinflation, though, I don't know. I don't know what that mean to Pokemon market. Maybe like Pokemon cards would go up if the value of the dollar is less. But right now, like the value of the US dollar is really strong, but you have all like this macroeconomic shit happening with like, because one of the things keeping the US dollar up is the fact that it's the global currency for oil. But if for whatever reason like the world stopped trading oil with US dollars, like that could be a scary thought. You see the value of your dollar freaking go down the drain real quick if that ever happens. And then with Fed, I'm not going to get in. We're not going to start talking about the Fed. We're not going to start talking about interest rates. That's crazy. Ancient Mew says, what makes the Blaziken Altart so desirable? I feel like it's not a popular species. Blaziken's still like a starter Pokemon. I mean, it's the 3rd evolution, but it's still a starter Pokemon. So I could see why it's popular. Let's see. Chug says, I saw some Dingleberry made a video of him at a CollectorCon trying to shill those Disney cards to people with booths. He was also trying to sell junk slabs to them. I don't know who he's talking about, but so Metamon Poll says, have any of you looked into the One Piece TCG that just released? I looked into it a little bit, but not enough to talk about it. There's a lot. See, I never got into like One Piece into the anime, so it just never really was something that I wanted to go after. But One Piece is definitely, I think, going to be relatively successful. But like I said, I say it's going to be relatively successful because of people I've heard talk about it who are really into it, but I'm not into it. So just because I've heard a lot of people talk about it, again, we are in this very small group of people who talk about this stuff. So the fact that I'm hearing people talk about it could mean absolutely nothing. It could potentially not be successful. Just because I've heard about it, that's not enough for it to say it's going to be successful or not. But I will say that there are definitely a lot of people talking about it. All right. This chat is, you guys are popping off, guys. Do you not want me to end this live? You are not letting me get to the bottom of this chat. So I think I just got to the point where people are now in the chat talking about like a Super Smash crossover, so I'll skip that. Max Power. Love Max Power's name. If you guys are a Simpsons fan, that was Homer's name, was Max Power, and he got his name off of a hairdryer. But great quote. Max Power said, PK, Pokemon Company should hire you for that Smash Brothers crossover idea. Think that would be phenomenal. I am just now looking into the Japanese Pika promos due to the one Scarlet and Violet included in their Japanese. Yeah. So that promo you're talking about, that Scarlet and Violet one, the one that you got if like you pre-ordered the games and stuff, has a very similar feeling to, I forget which number Blackstar promo is, but it was the one that came in the Sword and Shield figure collection. It's the one with the Pikachu, Score Bunny, Sobble, and Grookey. Like that, it was reprinted in Indonesia as like a KFC promo, but it has the same feel to it. And seeing how that card performed, I can definitely see, especially if Scarlet and Violet becomes like as big as we all kind of know it already is, I could definitely see that card being a well-chased card. Now, will we see that in English? Yeah, I don't see why we wouldn't. Doesn't make sense why we wouldn't. I mean, vice versa versus that same Black Star promo from Sword and Shield. We saw it in both Japanese, English, Indonesian. It was in a lot of different languages. People are talking about Hidden Fates. Yeah, people are talking about Area 51. Yeah, that was a legit arcade game. Yeah, it was. People are saying Area 51 was dope. Totally forgot that existed for the last 20 years. It's a sweet game though. People are talking. Yeah, I think now we got to people talking about PS2s having DVD players. This chat's all over the place tonight. Let me know if you guys like when I diverge a little bit and talk about things that maybe are not quite Pokemon. Like when I talk about, PS2s having DVD players because somebody mentioned in the chat. If you guys like this kind of conversation, like I'll keep having it and like maybe spend a little bit more time, but I do try to do my best to constantly pull it back to Pokemon as much as I can. And especially chat usually helps with that because a lot of the questions in the chat are normally about Pokemon. But it's pretty easy sometimes for me to like diverge a little bit. So Dan says we can talk about Magic 30th and Rudy Kits down the line. He said he's one of the few Timmys to buy and rip both. Okay. Let's see. Alex says Rudy is entertaining, but what he did was hypocritical. He was just transparent about not making your money back. Okay. Thinking Forward said, PK, now that Japan is open, have you considered going and doing a card hunt locally? I do not live in Japan, so that would be pretty hard for me. I don't understand the question. I don't live in Japan. Do you think I live in Japan? I would love to have been able, I love to go to Worlds in Japan, but I just know it's not going to happen. Got too much stuff going on at home. And because I was going to go to Japan for Worlds, I got to make it like a full week trip. I can't just be like what I've done for other events, like the Leonhardt pop-up shop. I flew in on a Friday, flew out on a Sunday. For Denver CollectorCon, I flew in on a Thursday, flew out on a Monday. Like, if you're going to do Worlds in Japan, like, you can't do a weekend, especially when you're talking about 14-hour flight there, 14-hour, home. That's 28 hours just flying, let alone like going to the airport and all that stuff. So can't do 4 days. You got to do a full week, maybe 2 weeks. And with my schedule right now and just my life in general, I just can't swing it. I wish I could. Yeah. People are talking about old maid cards are not a niche. Yes, they are not. They are not, and they're not even speculative at this point. They are a bubble waiting to happen. Ancient Muse said, how many 10s did you get on the Zard promos, PK? I got 20 out of 35. So not bad. Let's see. Weedle's Warehouse said, monetize your channel, then show your plays. I mean, my channel's monetized already. I don't show all my plays. I show them by accident sometimes when I'm just talking. Yeah, I don't know. So like those plays I show you, like, silly stuff, like super modern stuff, old maid cards from, Pokemon Center Japan, like silly stuff, or like a modern Pikachu promo. Like those things are easy you could show, because what are you gonna do? You can't like affect the market. I guess you could in a way affect the market. Like you could create like small buyouts of people buying cards. So like maybe try to like copy your plays. But the problem is a lot of my plays are super niche too, where it would be like if I were to show too many of my plays, especially when it comes to the more vintage stuff, like even if my competition was like 1 or 2 other people doing the same thing I would, that would be like cripplingly detrimental to me for a lot of my plays if there was just one other person doing the exact same thing. Like that's how niche some of my plays get. But like super modern stuff, like screw it, who cares? All this stuff is racing against the clock on a lot of this stuff, which is, I don't recommend doing like the constant race against the clock, where if you only see these modern plays, like you're going to think that's all I ever do is just the constant race against the clock. But a lot of my more niche plays are the complete opposite. Like they take time. Sometimes they could take like months or two just to sort, like a couple months just to source the cards, let alone to actually start making the grading plays and doing all that and I got cards I'm trying to like build markets on and stuff it takes a while. Like it's not easy. Carson Top says, start selling your plays like those dodgy sports card bettors do. I'm gonna pass on that. That's not what I want to start doing ever. Please don't ever let me do that too. So Trask says we can start a sovereign nation with Pokemon as currency. It's not backed by silver or gold, but no inflation if it's out of print. I like that. That's a great comment. I wish I could pin comments. That's great though. Professor Oak said, fuck, I love the word dingleberry. That's a great comment too. If you guys are not in Professor Oak's Discord, Professor Oak, if you're watching this, or if Drew's watching this right now still, do me a favor, or post in the chat right now a link to your Discord, because Professor Oak's Discord is a great place to be. A lot of people just in this chat are in there all the time. I'm not talking all the time, but I am reading pretty often, and it's a fun little Discord group to be in. And if there are people out there that are just watching this channel and they don't really know how to engage more with Pokemon, but they want to, and they're just like, I really like Pokemon, I really want to engage, I can't go to the collecticons, I can't spend the money to fly out, but and like, yeah, it's fun to, interact in chats and stuff like this, but you want to like kind of take Pokemon maybe a little bit to the next level. Like Discord is kind of the next level. Once you get to Discords, you start interacting with people, you start to really, you grow relationships with a lot of people. And Professor Oak's Discord's a great example of that. Wow. RN Genesis. Long time no see, buddy. Good to see you in the chat. RN Genesis is somebody that used to comment on my videos a long time ago in the past. I've missed you, buddy. Where you been? He says, you don't want to buy the sets people are talking about. You want to buy the sets nobody is talking about. Truer words have never been typed. Though you could take that to the bank. He is 100% correct. You do not want to buy the sets that people are talking about. You want to buy the sets nobody's talking about. He is correct. And the beautiful thing about Pokemon and having close to 100 main sets, not including specialty sets and promos and niche stuff, like they're out there. You just got to find them. I'll help you a little bit, but I can't hold your hand like the whole time. There are a lot of plays out there, though. There are a lot of plays in the background right now that are probably every single. This is the thing about Pokemon. You know, there are 120 people watching this right now, but out of those 120 people currently watching this live, every one of those 120 people probably has one play that they're doing right now in the background, because that's how massive this hobby is. You could have 120 different plays. Now, the thing is, what if all 120 of these people are doing 2 different plays or 3 different plays or 4 or 5, and then that number just exponentially starts getting crazy. And that's the thing. This hobby's great. Let's see. All right, I skipped down a little bit. Tom Barbo said, do we think the new super collectors Japanese box is worth 400? I don't know which box this is. I need to look at it. I don't know how I missed that. I haven't really been watching a lot of YouTube. So I think somebody said PTCG radio talked about it. I have to go watch his videos to really understand what you guys are talking about. Dylan Smith said, PK, is it a buyer's market right now? Right. Question mark. Yeah, it's always a buyer's market. It's always a seller's market. It's always a buyer's market. Sorry if you don't like that answer. There are, even in the height of heights in 2020, 2021, there was plays to be bought and there was plays to be sold. It's never not a buyer's market. It's just a matter now of what are you buying? You know, are you buying things that are, you missed your boat? Like, this is the funny thing about being a buyer's market is buyer's market. Are you trying to catch stuff on, you know, like the rocket ship up? Are you trying to like hang on for dear life and, or jump onto a rocket as it's going to space? Like, are you trying to do that? Or it's when are you making your plays? Jordan said, PK, what do you do for a living? Just curious. I've been asking some of the other PokeTubers. I've talked about what I do. So Jordan, if you're ever curious, I have a video on my channel called, I think it's called like My Backstory. And it's just a story of my backstory. It tells you how I got into the hobby, like what I do for a living, a little bit about me. If you are interested in that, that's probably a video you want to watch. I think it's called My Backstory. Let's see. Head Pokemon said, people are talking, sorry, I think people are talking to each other in the chat. So Head Pokemon said, in all caps, you haven't seen the Precious Collector box yet, question mark? I have not. Sorry, guys. People are saying, I thought you're on top of the hobby. Even really cool Japanese boxes. If I have seen it, I don't know what you're talking about. John Doe said, the Arceus UPC is pretty damn shiny inside. Not a bad display when he slid the back cover off. So I have the Arceus UPCs, but I never open one. Beedrill alt is nice. Okay. I did it. I made it to the bottom of the chat. I'm sure I skipped a lot of stuff. And if I skipped too much comments, I'm sorry, but I'm doing my best. You guys are just killing it tonight with the chat. Appreciate every single one of you guys. Every single one of you guys that tuned in. You guys are the best. But yeah, like I said, only thing I ever asked for, do me 2 things. Hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed to this channel, but you've made it close to an hour and 40 minutes into a live listening to somebody talk about Pokemon, but you haven't subscribed to the channel, I don't know. That's on you, but I would recommend you hit that subscribe button, guys. But for everybody else out there, appreciate every single one of you guys, and I'll catch you on the next video.